This lecture has been made available to you courtesy of the American Numismatic Society.
Okay, so I will begin now just sharing briefly our PowerPoint. Can you all see it? No? Why not? Oh, I don't know. Oh, share. Share, there you go. And share, yes, there you go. Okay, now you should be able to see it, right? Yes, perfect. So, as you see, very, let's say, not creatively, I thought it was nice to begin exactly with the table of contents. As you see, and at least this was my interpretation, and then we will discuss this with all of you, I hope. Andrew decided to, of course, begin before the official begin, clearly, of Roman provincial coinage. As you see, so the beginning of an empire, and so basically the beginning of an empire in Italy and Western Mediterranean. So you can see, and let's discuss then that, because that was his choice. I agree with that. It's a sort of a bold choice because he basically associates, no, not yet. He associates the expansion of Rome in Italy. It basically makes a clear correlation between the monetary phenomenon connected with the expansion of Rome in Italy to the one, of course, in the rest of the empire. So I found it fantastic. And then we're going to discuss the rest. For example, the revolution of Augustus. We know that Andrew wrote, among other things, 2011 article, which is exactly called the Augustan Revolution as seen from the provinces. But for example, in that case, I would have something to say, because I do think that some of the monetary innovation that go under the cap of Augustus, in reality, were made a little bit earlier, where we can discuss this. So this is, several of you know this is a very common, let's say, quote when you discuss monetary provincial coinage, because it is this fictional speech between Maecenas and Augustus, but it's written by Cassius Dio, so you're in the 3rd century CE, so 300 years later. And you see that here Maecenas says to Augustus that in theory none of the cities should be allowed, none of the cities in the empire should be allowed to retain their local weights and local coinage. And of course, in theory, what we see of Roman provincial coinage is exactly the contrary, that these cities were actually keeping their coins, in some way their measure, but in some way, and this is exactly what Andrew discusses in the book, Maecenas' speech is also true. I mean, Dio's fictional speech is also true, because there are all these correlations.
For me, just kind of not really having a background in Roman numismatics, just really doing Celtic, I thought this was like just a really interesting quote for me, because I had always kind of thought Rome kind of just an organized system, a single monetary system. I didn't realize kind of just all the different pockets of it and how complicated that it would get. And I just loved all the different images in the book, and there were kind of like the bronze tablets that
Tauromenion.
Isrude? I'm sorry.
The Isrude. Okay, the Ice sorry. I was talking about the tabule, guvine. Okay.
No, I didn't use the right words. And then comparing that then to like the bronze coins in the Gallic provinces. Like it's
yes.
just so widely different.
Yes, or the ones in Macedonia. Yes, no, it's absolutely amazing. And exactly, just to say that, that's exactly, this is another classic quote from Crawford, says, for the fact that the Romans did not export their own coinage into the Greek world does not mean that their presence had no effect on existing monetary patterns. So which is apparently exactly the contrary of what is said in Dio, and they are both true. So we will see in which way, actually, I hopefully discuss it with you. And this is we are basically at the very end of what I prepared, really. I prepared more, but this is what I was planning to use as an introduction. There is this very important, according to me, article which has been by Andrew, published in this volume, Grecia Capta, edited by Richard Ashton and Nathan Badu, in which he exactly gives like these new approaches to the study of coinage in the early Roman provinces. And he says this work and the new approach seems very familiar now. He's talking about the idea of Roman provincial coinage. And much of what we used to call Greek, or at least Hellenistic, numismatics, now operates in a Roman framework. I mean, it is hard to exaggerate the profound change of attitude that has taken place over the last generation. But what he warns about, and of course I took it at heart in my own production, is that it seems to me that one consequence has been that the debate has become fragmented, and that's what you said, and localized to Greece or Spain or wherever. So, but instead of seeing all of these areas, as he says, part of the Roman Empire. No, these are all areas that anyway are part of the Roman Empire or interacting with the Roman Empire. And of course, as you know, some of you know at least, this is something we took at heart, really, this idea in my latest book, of course, together with all the co-authors, which is exactly about that. So it's the local coinages in a Roman world. So how all these different monetary systems actually interacted together. So that said, I will stop sharing the PowerPoint for now, and I open the field to possible questions. Are there any questions, something specifically that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, or if not specifically questions, maybe like talking points, or I saw
You saw an hand?
I saw a hand go up.
Okay.
But
You're gonna mute yourself if you like, if there is a question actually.
I think John Connolly was the first hand I think I saw. Sorry, now that
Okay.
I want to go first, John. No? No? Okay.
No. Okay. Or you have a question for me?
No.
Because I will rather not. Yeah.
Well, just a comment from me.
Hi, Bruce.
Hi. Yeah, just, I really like this book. I love reading it. It's a great book, I thought. And I love the scope, the way it covers the entire Mediterranean world from one end to the other. And it ties everything together for me through time and space. Regarding that sort of RPC-0 era, the Iberian coinage has always been kind of a mystery to me. What was the controlling factor on the Iberian denarii? And he makes the interesting comparison between Iberian denarii and the Sistophori, which are sort of going on at the same time. Not necessarily the same causation exactly, but they're a similar role, perhaps.
I mean, Bruce, of course, you know very well that here You are really speaking to my heart. And of course, perhaps you remember that when we did during the ANA seminar, and the idea was exactly comparing all of these. I actually have a moment, I have a slide on the Iberian denarii, so that, I mean, everyone can have the same image under their eyes. Let's see a moment if I can get there. As you see, I have, there you go. So I think this is, for example, exactly one of the Iberian denarii. By the way, we have a huge collection of Iberian denarii here at ANS. Our Celtiberian section still needs to be better cataloged. So this is a call to arms in some way. But anyway, Burnett here in his book, and this is something, it's also in the Wichonke catalog, in the part dedicated to Spain, is actually expanding what is Perepau Ripollet's idea about the fact that these denarii, since they are the only silver issued in Spain beside the Roman denarii after the conquest, were somehow controlled by the governors. And the same way this happened 1 century later, basically, in the province of Asia, where the Sistofori, which were the provincial silver, so a silver that now we know also thanks to metallurgical analysis, that we know that all that silver from the 90 BCE on in Asia was produced out of a unified source of bullion, so which probably is really provided by the Romans. So in that case, we really have the proof of that in some way. And from the 50s on, from 58 BCE on, you have the names of the governors. So, but even before that, we have to imagine that, and that's why probably we have the same bullion, the Sistofori were actually used by the Romans in the province of Asia, in the same way in which these Iberian denarii were used 1 century earlier, in the 2nd century BCE, in Spain. And it's fantastic, really. I don't know, like I know Andrew will not be happy that I actually really agree with him, and I'm happy about, and I really like the fact that he's establishing all this collection, because in this book, he really does what he was warning, what he said in 2021, that it was a problem, that, you know, who studies Iberian numismatics only studies Iberian numismatics, and who studies, for example, the Sistofori only studying Sistofori, without putting them together as part of the same phenomenon. And that's exactly what he does there. So Bruce, you really, with this question, are really highlighting what is, according to me, a great value of this book, which is putting together all these different coinages before they look Roman in some way. Because, for example, here you see you have an Iberian script, okay, for Turiasu, but this is probably controlled by the governors. I mean, we're basically sure about it. So I'll stop sharing again. So thank you again for this question. Do we have any other question from you before something we want to discuss? And once again, this is the first of our ANS book club series. So then we will be very happy to have feedback from you if you think we should organize this differently, for example.
Yeah, I will say, if you want to share that feedback, please just send it to membership@numismatics.org, and that'll make its way to me, and we can kind of think about that for future ones.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes. So, any other question from any of you?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Nathaniel?
Hey, hey.
So I'm definitely joining the chorus praising the book, which is a fascinating read.
Andrew will not be happy. I'm sorry. Okay, anyway, it's okay.
I was wondering, could we talk a little more about the question of inflation in the 3rd century CE and whether that contributed or not to the end of provincial coinage?
Absolutely. Actually, I have, again, a slide ready for that. No. So you are, so thank you. And let me share again my PowerPoint here. Here you go. Share. I have to go a little bit farther. Sorry that you have to see all my deck, but you see, I thought about echo. There you go. So now, this is the denominational system in Greece, okay? This is an article of Bouchon in 2017, that in theory, that after the so-called diortoma, Thessalian diortoma of the 19 BCE, and basically the important thing, I mean, and then we can discuss more if you want about the diortoma, but the important thing, as you can see, is that you basically have the Assarion, okay? The Assarion that should be basically considered as an Roman as, okay? But which by this time was 13 grams, okay? Made in 13 grams. And you have, on the contrary, here, the Assarion, let's say, which is the equivalent of the hemiobol, is a coin that is exactly half the weight. Okay? So the idea is that there is, as you can see, an enormous advantage, let's begin, for the cities in the East, okay, to keep producing bronze, because basically the Assarion is equivalent to an hemiobol or tetrachalcon and is basically 5 to 7 grams, okay? And the very interesting thing, and you have this in this inscription, this in the 2nd century CE, so fast forward 2 centuries, and then I'm getting to your question precisely, is that still, what is the incredible advantage? Is that, of course, you know that usually you have that 16 asses equal to a denarius, okay? So in theory, these assaria, which were actually 1/2 of the asses issued in Rome, could be exchanged for silver. Even if, as you can see from this inscription from Pergamon, people were not exactly happy about that, about giving basically good silver for this, sorry the word, crappy bronze. And so basically what happened is that, for example, this is an edict of Hadrian against the money changer in Pergamon, because Hadrian said, okay, you don't want to give 1 denarius for 16 assaria, but you give 1 denarius for 18 assaria, and that you have to do. There is no alternative. Because of course the point is that if people would not have accepted basically this idea of changing good silver, because then of course Rome had to receive the taxes in silver. So there was somebody, of course, in between that needed to be screwed, clearly was not Rome. And so basically saying to them, there's no way you have to accept the bronze. Because of course, without this, without this money changer accepting the bronze, the provincial bronze, and exchange it for silver, basically all the provincial coinage system, which was mainly bronze, would have completely collapsed. And that means that then Rome would have to send bronze basically everywhere. You see, that's the problem for Rome. I mean, it's not that the Rome really cares. And the cities, of course, had an enormous advantage in this, because, of course, also the cities got tax, a colubos, a tax on the money exchange. So the thing is that, and Burnett really, once again, yes, it's horrible that we have to say good things about the book. As I said, Andrew will not be happy about this. But the moment in which the bronze system collapses entirely, and even the silver system collapses entirely with inflation, this, first of all, what you have at first is the increase on denominations. So, for example, if you have in mind, and the book makes a very good point in this, if you have in mind the 3rd century or late 2nd century CE provincial coinage from Asia Minor, from the East, you have these huge coins, for example. So it's the end of the small denominations, for example, while, of course, in the 1st century CE and before, you have very small denominations still. So there is this idea. So, but also, so gradually, and I have, unfortunately, I didn't include this slide, but you can clearly see that the Assaria, the weight of the Assaria equivalent, so the equivalents, even if these are bigger denominations, imagine the weight of the Assarion increases during the 2nd, 3rd century, so till it becomes basically equivalent to what was issued in Rome. So at that point, there was not great advantage for the cities. But on top, you have basically the end, in some way, of the bronze coinage in Rome, because basically the debased silver, becomes basically what bronze used to be after the crisis, of course, the inflation. And at that point, all this system, you see, of exchange between good Roman silver and local bronze collapses. And so and this is something that has always been discussed. But again, I think one great merit of this book is the fact that Andrew really puts it in context and really, in some way, correlates what happens in Rome with what happens in the provinces, which is really fundamental, because, as I said, these provinces kept issuing bronze for centuries because it was enormously advantageous for the reason I showed you, but also actually Andrew, again, quotes the description I showed you in the book, of course, of this money changer. Is a very famous one. And he touches on this diortoma, but really, I think it's important that exactly the diortoma, the same thing was happening all over the provinces, still producing coinage. Because it was advantageous. So thank you. This is incredibly important question. New question. Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Good morning. Good morning
Good
from
morning.
you. I just like to say I enjoy the book and indeed the whole series. This is one of several now. I have a particular interest in countermarks, and so when I buy a new book, I look at the index for the word countermark and go from there. And it kind of follows on a bit from what you're saying about the destabilization and the inflation and the collapse of the monetary system and the increasing use of countermarks to revalue and revalidate coins. So for me, that's the angle that I come into the book from. And as you know, towards the end, there was increasing use of countermarks,
Yes.
opposed to stable parts of the empire like Egypt, where you hardly ever see countermarks on coins because, as you know, it was basically the emperor's province and very stable, and there was no need for countermarks really. So yeah.
But also because you are absolutely right. Also, the Egypt was a closed currency system, so basically they don't care what happened around them. So that's why, of course, they were not very happy when Diocletian decided to close their provincial mint in Alexandria, because for the first time in like what? I mean, yes, the first time in basically 6 centuries, they would have to deal with what everybody else was dealing, including inflation. Yeah, there was like a armed rebellion. Domitianus. So you're absolutely right. Again, I loved, of course, yes, you have, of course, all these value marks and contour marks, but the only thing is that, if I remember correctly, but please, John, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember if, for example, Andrew mentions in the book one perhaps of the first occurrences of contour marks in, let's say, pre-Roman provincial coinage, which is, I mean, I find it super interesting. The coinage of the duoviri in Corinth, there is, I think, Isteus, I don't know, it's like in 43 BCE. These duoviri, this pair of duoviri, decided to lower the weight standard. And in order, so it's sort of the contrary, they lowered the weight standard, but then the coinage became overvalued. In order to make sure that, people understood that, for example, that coin, in spite of the fact that it was weighing less, was still an assarion, they had, for example, alpha put on it. Okay, so it was super interesting there, because usually contour marks, as you rightly said, were used, for example, when there is strong inflation, and so exactly. But in this case, it was exactly the contrary. And this again happens exactly like in what now we're going to call coinage in the Roman provinces, if we don't want to call it all Roman provincial coinage. But so this for me was, but I don't remember if he makes that, but there are other examples, for example, of these sort of contour marks in cranium, and also I think in dime. So, but these are, for example, these are 1st century BCE examples, where actually you have a coinage that is actually underweight, and then you have the contour mark on it to say, no, this has the value, for example, of an assarion, whatever. So this is before, for example, the Thessalian diortoma. And after that, of course, you have all these contour marks. So yes, I really think that the great value here is that Andrew puts together what's happening in Rome with what's happening in the provinces. And it really shows how they work together. I don't know if I answered or I said something that is relevant to your observation. And thank you for listening to us from New Zealand, by the way. Really, where are you in New Zealand?
Oh, I live in Cambridge, which is in the North Island.
Okay. Yeah, I've never.
6:30 in the morning.
Wow.
Early.
So look, I mean, so thank you. I mean, we will let also Andrew know that we have a 6:30 a.m.
Yeah, well, actually, It's going to be worse later tonight. I'm going to zoom in for the Irish Numismatic Society. They've got a seminar starting at 1 o'clock their time, which is called 1 a.m. my time. So it's a bit like getting up to watch a rugby game. It's same thing, but it's an afternoon seminar, so it'll be about 3 or 4 hours, I think. But there's the last speaker is one I particularly want to listen to. So there we go. So I do.
Why? You're very dedicated, so really thank you for this. Okay. Any other questions? No.
So then I can just kind of turn to some of the ones that we had prepared ahead of time. So Lucia, what do you think about Burnett's idea of unifying the monetary narrative of the conquest of Italy and of the other provinces? It certainly overrides the usual distinctions between Roman Republican and Roman pre-provincial coinage. Do you find it confusing, especially in light of your own recent book, Local Coinages in a Roman World?
Thank you for this very spontaneous question, yes. Ryan. Thank you very much. I think I already expressed to you how fantastic I actually found this idea of really putting together, really correlating the conquest of Italy with the conquest of the rest of the empire. So basically, of the monetary consequences of the conquest of Italy with the monetary consequences of the conquest of the rest of the empire. For example, exactly one thing we would like to ask you, and we would appreciate your feedback on this, is that, for example, if for the next book club, you want us, for example, to show coins too. We decided this time not to show coins because we thought that it would be a little bit confusing in some way. So, but okay, one thing I want to show you, for example, I found this super fascinating in my own research, and it's very nice that Andrew pointed this out. And even if it doesn't mention this specific case, for example, the reductionist standard of Tarentum, but basically it's the same idea. So what we see when the Romans conquer a territory is that they immediately take control, basically, of the silver coinage, and usually they let bronze coinage. They had a much more laissez-faire attitude toward bronze coinage. And I think that you see, and it's evident, for example, with the diortoma that we just discussed, and so, or even with the Iberian denarii, is that at a certain point, there is a clear equivalence between local silver, basically, and Roman denominations. But even before that, what you have is that you have a sort of standardization of silver denominations. And this is what you see. So basically, usually each city had their own denominational system. And what you see, and I'm very happy to discuss this if you don't agree with that, is that you have a sort of a standardization so all the silver begins to be minted at the same standard, so that it could circulate basically and be used, okay, all over basically. So, and what is to me amazing, okay, is that you see the same happening, and Andrew, for example, highlighted this, even if he doesn't mention the specific thing. For example, when the Romans, and we're talking about 280 BCE, so still in the 3rd century BCE, conquer Tarentum, what happens is that Tarentum had a specific weight standard for its didrams, for the nomos. You see, it was almost 8 grams. What happens is that immediately after the Roman conquest, Tarentum keeps issuing coinage, but it lowers the standard to match, to match the standard of Naples. And let's remember that Naples is also the place that issues, as Andrew shows, but so as shown in the past, and is of course highlighting in the book, is also minting the first Roman diagrams. So what happens is that you have, just to show even that, not only Tarentum and Neapolis, basically, until the Second Punic War, are the one, until the end of the First Punic War, until 241 BCE, they are the main mints for silver in southern Italy. They issue at the same standard, and incredibly enough, and this is fantastic, they even have joint issue, the so-called Campano-Tarentine issues, where you have the obverse, which is the face of Parthenope, so the nymph of the civic badge, one of the civic badges of Naples, because it was the namesake of Neapolis, whose first name was Parthenope, of course. And then you have here Taras with the dolphin, which is the namesake and founder of Tarentum. So they have even a joint issue here, which shows you how, of course, these two mints at this point were separate in name, but were really issuing coinage for a sort of unified southern Italy. And I like, even this is not something that, this is perhaps too bold of a comparison and a relation, but that's not what Andrew did. But for example, you know that already in the 1st century CE, you begin to have all these issues, these homonoia issues, so like issues, joint issues between cities in the Roman Empire, which of course they are bronze because at this point the cities of course could not control silver, with very rare exceptions, but it's really this idea that you have these civic authorities are minting together because in reality they are really part of the same system. And this is a system that the Romans had inaugurated, you see, already in the 3rd century BCE with Tarentum and Neapolis. So I do think that this really works together very well. And as I said, I didn't read actually Andrew's book until it came out. And so unfortunately, I could not take advantage of this while I was conceiving, for example, the introduction to the Witschonke catalog. But I'm very happy to see this here because I think that this is the same system. So standardization and then governmental control in some way of silver coinage, and then you have this laissez-faire policy for what concerns bronze, which is basically what you see in Italy. So in the 3rd century BCE, you have a decrease in the mints producing silver. So for example, I forgot the last issue of, it's just that I want to show this to you because it's just too fun, sorry. Sorry for this, for me being, going back to this. Yeah, no, no, okay, sorry for this. It's not so far, okay. So this one is the last silver issue of the city of Locri. As you see, very close, still in the 3rd century BCE. And you can see that this, Locri had been issuing silver for 3 centuries, basically, okay? And the last one is basically the swan song of Locri. Silver coinage is Pistis Fides, that is crowning Rome. So really, Locri is telling us specifically why they are stopping minting silver, and not because Rome told us, because it was not necessary anymore. Basically, the Tarentum, so you have this control, you have these two main mints, Neapolis, Tarentum, basically they're issuing silver, but everybody else anyway, and this is what you see in Italy too, you have this boom, like this huge spike in the production of bronze. And this is exactly what you see everywhere in the Roman Empire. First in the West, because of course is the West and the East. It's very fun. It's always the same idea. So the end of silver autonomous issues, you see them in Italy, you see them in the empire, the rest of the empire, and then you have this boom of local bronze. And I'll stop sharing, and I ask you if you have any questions. No questions? Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, one point. We see, like in the 1st century BC, there's a big shortage of Roman bronze coinage in Italy and Spain too, I think. So you see the imitations being made, and there's a coin that I wasn't familiar with before. It's figure 3.6. It's like a token.
Can you show me, tell me the page, please?
Page 81.
81, yes.
You know, the coin without an inscription. It's almost like a private trade token, it seems. You know, like a British 18th century or 19th century trade token, or a United States hard times token. So we really don't know why so little bronze was struck by Rome, do we?
So, Bruce, this is another fantastic question. Clive Stannard literally dedicated 30 years of his life, literally, in studying these tokens. And we actually have, not to, of course, brag about our institution, we have an enormous collection of these tokens, and here, because they were part of this Wichonke collection, and actually Clive wrote, and really I can send you this, a lot of his, some of his production is also on academia, but he wrote a fantastic introduction for this section of the Wichonke catalog, which is precisely on this unofficial coinage in Italy. Yes, I mean, the idea is this. There is a shortage of official bronze. The Romans did not basically issue coins, bronze coinage, almost between 150 and the 80s BCE. While at this point, all of Italy and the West was all on Roman, was all completely integrated in the Roman denominational system. So each, again, territory responds to this in a different ways. So for example, in Spain, you have, again, an explosion in civic coinage, in civic bronze coinage. You have an enormous amount, as you said, of imitations of Roman Republican coinage. And in Italy, you have basically, again, two different phenomena. It's fantastic, but it's really, you see how similar they are, because basically you have the colonies, for example, Paestum, there are colonies, or Copia. They began issuing an enormous amount of bronze coinage. And Crawford is the one that in 1973, for the first time, used in an article this term auxiliary coinage. So basically, the coinage is in the name of Paestum, in the name of Copia, in the name of Vibo, whatever, but clearly is issued to quench in some way the thirst for bronze coinage. And then you have, exactly, and to go back to your question, I didn't forget, then you have basically these huge companies, literally, that were operating between Italy and Spain, because in Spain you have the quarries, but also the silver quarries, but you also have these like oil, wine. Let's forget that by 1st century BCE, Italy had lost, unfortunately, the supremacy in oil and wine to Gaul and Spain. So you had these huge companies, and basically this is, I think, Clive Stannard's most stunning discovery, is that these private companies basically were using that there are a lot of similarities between the types used for this sort of private tokens, private tokens between Spain and Central Italy. And in Central Italy, of course, there were all these huge, like Minturne, there were all these huge harbors, for example. So the same companies that were operating, and also, for example, in Testaccio, in Rome, in the commercial harbor of Rome, you have all these pieces, basically shards of amphorae that were, for example, transporting batic oil, so the oil from Spain, and they have, for example, the same names on these amphora shards that you have on these small tokens in Central Italy and in Spain, for example. For example, the anni, they were very, very important. So really, yes, it is exactly the same. We don't really know, for example, probably there are some tokens, for example, in Spain, where it's written PS, probably Publica Societas. So perhaps this was controlled by the Societates Publicanorum, so the tax farmers who had a lot of power in Spain because they were also controlling the quarries. But there were also private negociatores, so traders, who were operating between Spain and Italy, and they were using precisely these tokens. And really, that is incredible, because you really see how these companies were operating between Spain and Italy. So once again, how interconnected the Mediterranean was, and how you have, again, very different solutions to the dearth of bronze currencies. So you can have Paestum is doing that, the colonies are doing that, the Spanish cities are issuing their own bronze, but then they have they are also this imitation of Roman bronze, and then you have also these private tokens. And they all respond to the same idea. The problem is that they are completely integrated in the Roman economic system. There is not enough bronze for small transactions. And how do you do? And the Romans were okay with that, for sure, because clearly they knew about it. Doesn't matter. I mean,
are these private tokens the same as tessera, or are they distinct?
Good question. The reality is that the tessere, as you know, there is this huge database created by Claire Rowan. Yes. Token and communities. Now, the reality is that usually they are called sort of interchangeably tessere and tokens. Of course, there are some tessere whose specific, the tessere numularia, for example, the tessere to enter, of course, the baths, the tessere to enter, I don't know, the games. So we know of the specific function of some tessere, which were really special purpose sort of currencies.
Often they were made of clay and lead and things, which may be because of the shortage of bronze as well.
Yes, but we also have, as you know very well, bronze tesserae. And some of these tokens that we are discussing, actually, some of these private tokens are also made out of lead. And of course, in Spain, it makes a lot of sense because, of course, it's a byproduct of the smelting of silver. But also in Italy, in central Italy, you have a lot of lead. So the reality is that they are using the same media, the same medium, both of them, both these, you know, because anyway, they are special purpose currency, so they are clearly they have no intrinsic value. So the really you make them as big as you want and of the material you want, basically, as far as there is an authority guaranteeing for them. So the huge question is, which authority is guaranteeing for these tokens, for example? And that the big question, the problem is, or perhaps it's a great thing for us, is that we don't know. Like, because you see, it's, okay, lead token, fine, but who is guaranteeing for that? The ANI? Who else? I don't know, we don't know. So that's our problem. But anyway, this was another great question. I see, do we understand, Mike, do we understand how the metallurgy of the bronze changed over time? My impression is that tin was increasingly scarce and was gradually replaced by lead in the bronze coin alloy. I mean, yes, I would tend to agree to that also because, of course, because of the smelting of silver, you have an increasing availability of bronze. But let's also remember that then this could be true in the Roman Republican world, and then you have the importance of zinc. For example, you have all the emergence of orichalcum, and so tin, zinc, and so they appear again because, of course, they look better. So I would say that it is for example, from the beginning of the 1st century BCE on, according to me, and not only according to me, but according to the people studying these, because of Pontic influence, you have the emergence of orichalcum, so brass coinage, and brass then becomes basically almost standard, no? It's always so brass emerges in pre-provincial bronze coinage, emerges first in Asia Minor, probably once again because of Mithridates, and then Julius Caesar. Under Julius Caesar, you have the first official issue in brass. And then basically, you know that brass, zinc, is integrated in the Roman official imperial monetary system by Augustus, for example. So, yeah, I think it works in some way. I mean, this is my idea, and this is open for discussion, but until the Mithridatic Wars. So there is also, and of course, you know, orichalcum looks good. So, and because of that, they can get away with less metal, which is a huge thing. Gilles Brunsburg wrote also about it, about the fact that orichalcum coins can weigh less, while lead doesn't make bronze look as good. And really it's a thing, because of course they have nominal value, but you're much happier about handling a nicely struck bronze coin that looks good, rather than, you know, like sort of a not so nice looking one. other questions for us? And I hope I answered to you, Mike, but.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions for us? No? Yeah. Another very spontaneous question.
Yes, very spontaneous. So I think, would you agree with the role Burnett assigns to Augustus as the initiator of a revolution? I don't think we've spoken much about that.
No. We discussed this actually with Andrew in person several times since, actually the second time I met Andrew in person while I was still a graduate student in 2016. And I told him that I think that the Augustan Revolution, according to me, was a revolution, and I wrote about this in terms of sheer quantity of coinage. But there are a lot of things that appear much earlier, and specifically under Mark Antony. So Mark Antony, for example, I'll show you one slide here. Okay, and I know that we are almost, our time is almost finished, but I'll show you this. Let's see, it's this, no, let's hope if I, okay, no, okay. So for example, it is a fact that Augustus, under Augustus, you have this enormous amount of cities, client kings beginning to issue coinage with the portrait of the emperor. For example, this is a Sistophorus, and you have the portrait of Augustus. But my contention is that actually the first one who strongly put his face, not his name, the name of Roman magistrate had already been on coinage in the provinces since the 60s, the 50s, as exactly we said already for the other, for example, for the Sistophori, but we have a lot of other examples in Syria and so and so. But Mark Antony is also the one that puts his face on in a very, very, I'm going to say, yes, in a clearly very determinate way on several coinages, okay? And also has this idea of establishing this dynasty with, for example, Octavia. Now he appears on coins with Octavia, puts his wife, the cities put his wife Fulvia, for example, on coinage. So my idea is that, for example, Mark Antony was the first one, for example, who actually, we have other examples, of course, of Roman magistrate. The first one is Flamininus on Roman coinage. But with Mark Antony, is clear that there is really a political line there, that he wants to be seen in some way as the Hellenistic kings in some way, and that's what happens. Another very important element is, for example, this idea of the sestertii. Under Augustus, basically, there is this idea then aborted because, of course, it was not convenient for the cities. Because, as I said, we have the Assaria that was much convenient for the cities. But you have under Augustus this issue of so-called sestertii in the East. That, of course, Andrew puts in his book and also in this article 2011. But the first one, we issued a base metal sestertius, because we know that the sestertius was originally a fraction of the denarius. In the East, for example, is Mark Antony again with the fleet coinage. So my contention is that, as always, is that the Augustan Revolution is one in terms of numbers. There is no doubt that then after Augustus, it becomes the norm. But the one who actually had the idea was not Augustus, but Mark Antony. So Mark Antony is the initiator, as I wrote in an article, of the Bronze Revolution in the East. And then, of course, Augustus take it from there. But yes, I mean, I am a huge apologist and fan of Mark Antony. And I think we have now, we are at 2 p.m. But you have one very last question for us, if you have another question for us. No. Okay, so in this case, first of all, thank you for coming and discussing with us this book. This is, as I said, this is the first time, this is our first attempt at this. I like it very much, sincerely. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And then we have, I don't know when, next long table is the one with Alessandro Cavagna,
Yep.
Who is a full professor at the University of Milan, and will speak about Alexandrian coinage, so completely different. So please join us. I don't remember now top of my head when is the next ANS club thing. I think not for other 2 months. Or
Book club?
Book club.
It's still a few months away, yeah, so.
Exactly. So we will change. Our idea is that please write us if you have, exactly. I don't remember now what book, we will advertise it. And please actually send to membership if you have any book suggestions, because of course we already have an idea for the year, and we will send out now an email, a reminder actually with the books we suggest for the year. That is not all Roman, not all ancient actually, but if you have other ideas, please send it to us, because our idea is that this has to be participated. So it's not us, we're just facilitating the discussion. So anyway, thank you very much for being with us, really. Grazie tante.